I think the biggest challenge that African pension funds are facing is growth in assets under management. Um, if you look in countries like Nigeria, Kenya, assets are growing at about 30% a year. And if you're an investment manager looking for new sort of productive investments, that's difficult to manage. It's also showing up in a different way in some countries like Namibia, where pension assets are now 80% of GDP. So, if you have restrictions, as most African pension funds do in terms of investing outside your country, if you manage 80% of your country's economy, how do you invest productively? So the growth in assets under management is creating pressures for diversification in terms of asset classes, in terms of geographies. But that brings another challenge, which is that African pension funds really have not done much alternative assets to date, so they don't know these asset classes. Their regulators don't know them. So it's a question of how do we invest these growing assets safely? But it all comes to the point of growth and the rate at which the assets are growing. That's always a tough question. I mean, I think there are a number of solutions. I think that, first of all, what is clear is that we need to open up the space. We need to create more products for these funds to invest in. The question is, how do you do that safely? Because, as we know, it's not just regulation. Because if you look at a lot of the pension markets, they are underutilized, underinvested in terms of their allocations. So it's about education for the pension funds, for the regulators, but also for the project sponsors, be they an infrastructure project or a private equity fund. And the education point for them is actually, what are the constraints under which African pension funds are operating? What are the regulations? What are their, so that they're actually proposing a solution as opposed to selling an infrastructure project or a private equity fund, which is what tends to happen. So I think the solution is education. It's creating structures that work. It's around working together as an industry in the broad sense of the word. So the pension funds, the regulators, the investors, the project sponsors, and everybody else. The first way is regulation. First way is regulation because, as you know, the pension funds, they all have their regulatory guidelines, their asset allocations, whatever. If you look across most markets today, you will see that 70-60% of the assets are in government paper. So there's that diversification at two levels in terms of opening up the possibilities, so increasing the number of asset classes in which people can invest. But there's also geographic diversification, which is about allowing pension funds to invest outside their jurisdiction. Yeah, but to actually get any of this happening, you actually need to do a whole lot of education.